Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. We believe that God's Word has the power to change lives. So grab a pen and paper and get ready for this message.
So, growing up, I grew up in the church. I was a church kid. I was going through my garage just the other day, digging through some old things, and I found this sheet that I guess I had written what I wanted to be whenever I get older, who I wanted to be like. And on this sheet said that I wanted to be like Paul, but with a girlfriend. And so that was huge to me, right? So I had my priorities in line. Paul first, then a girlfriend, probably was around middle school age. And you wanted to be like Paul because Paul wrote most of the New Testament. Paul has this amazing story of being like this man that persecuted the church, very much against God. And then all of a sudden on his way to continuing to persecute Christians, he has this encounter with Jesus. And he is radically transformed. And he just starts planting all these churches and pouring into all these people. And it was like, man, I want to be like Paul, just, with a girlfriend. And you're so focused on being that leader, that guy that makes this huge impact. That's what you want. And then as life would have it, there's another individual that I identify even more with, that on a personal level. And this guy is Simon Peter. I get Simon Peter. Paul is amazing. We read his letters, his inspired letters. I mean, he's amazing, all that he did. But I get Simon Peter. See, Simon Peter was a fisherman. And as we move through his story, you see in Luke chapter 5 that he's mending his nets. He's done for the day. He's done fishing. And there's this guy that comes ashore, and he uses his boat to preach. And after he gets done preaching, he's like, hey, Peter, let's go out and fish. And Peter's, we're done for the day. I appreciate your word. I'll let you use my boat. I'm kind of wanting to go home, relax. And Jesus talks him into it, and they go out into the water. And Jesus tells him where to cast his net. And they pull up so much fish that it almost takes the boat, flips the boat over. So this is one of the first encounters that Peter has with Jesus. And Jesus calls Peter to follow after him. And when this miracle happens, when they pull up all this fish, after not having caught anything before, Peter is very humbled. Very humbled. Depart from me, I can't be with you. I'm not good enough to be with you. Now, he's right. He's very right. But Jesus is no, follow me. It's good. Don't be afraid. Follow me. And then you move beyond that to one of the coolest moments in the Gospels. It's when the disciples were in a boat, and they were going across the same sea, and Jesus was off to himself on shore. He was praying. And they were all headed to the same location, but they're taking a boat. And Jesus, not needing a boat, and they're halfway out in the water, and a storm is taking place. Jesus decides, I need to get there, so the quickest way is through the water. So he starts walking, and as he's walking, and I can't even imagine, my brain can't even, I go out to Summersville Lake a lot, and I was out on a ledge the other day, and I was looking across the lake, and I was like, if a person came walking on the water at me, I am pretty sure we wouldn't be having a conversation. I would not be waiting to talk to that person. I'll just let somebody else tell me what happened. I'm out of here. But the disciples are on the water, and they're And again, who's the first disciple that sees him? Who knows? It's like, I'm not seeing, like the storm's crazy, and they see him coming. And Peter has the courage to say, I would like to do that. Like, I want to do that. Like, so he's like, Jesus, if that's you, then tell me to come out onto the water, and I'll get out there. And so Jesus tells him to get out of the boat, and he does. And so he starts to walk, and he's walking on water, and it says he got focused on the wind, he got focused on the waves. He got focused on the fact that he was very natural and he was doing something supernatural. And he starts to doubt. He takes his eyes off Jesus and he starts to sink. Jesus saves him, pulls him, gets him back in the boat. And then you move through the Gospels and you see this one conversation where Jesus is like, who do you all think that I am? Talking to his disciples. Who do you think that I am? Peter steps up and he's like, you're the Messiah. You're the Savior. You're the Son of God. That's the right answer. That's the big answer. And Jesus is like, this is amazing. Like this is what I'm going to build my church on. This belief, this hope, this faith. And then almost immediately thereafter, Jesus is talking about how he has to suffer. And Peter's like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to let anybody do anything to you. And then Jesus looks at him and says, and here's the thing. It says that Peter pulls him to the side. And it was like, no, that's not going to happen. You're not going to suffer. That's not going to happen. And it says Jesus turns to the disciples and says to Peter, get behind me, Satan. Like calls him out in front of all of them publicly. So he goes from this high, yes, I got the right answer, the one that nobody else had, to he just called me Satan. But it doesn't shake Peter. Like Peter stays right with Jesus. Because in the very next chapter in Mark, there's this scene, it's called the Transfiguration. It's when Jesus shows Peter, James, and John his holiness, how great he really is, that he is the Son of God. And in that moment, it says that Peter, being afraid and not knowing what to say, which means just be quiet, he doesn't, and he shouts out, we should build shelters and just bunker down right here. This is a great moment. This is a great place. And I understand that. I understand how many of you, when Pastor Brandon goes, hey, we're going to take a year of rest, you were like, but we're in a great place. Like, why don't we just keep going? Why don't we just, and see, Peter is caught up in no. Like, this is good. Like, let's stay. And Jesus is like, in this particular part, God interrupts him and says, this is my son in whom I'm pleased. Like, he's just interrupts Peter. Peter doesn't go anywhere. And then you move to where it's getting in the final moments of the life of Jesus. And Jesus is washing their feet. And Peter goes, no, you're not going to wash my feet. And Jesus looks at him and says, if you don't let me wash your feet, you're not worthy of me. And while that sounds, and then Peter, in true Peter fashion, says, well, then wash every bit of me, head to toe. Because what Peter was saying initially is like, right when we try to work our way into salvation, that's our default mode. Is I need to earn this. No, not your sacrifice, not your help. I'll get this. And Jesus is like, no, like it's only going to be through me. And as they're all sitting there, Jesus starts to talk about how he's going to suffer, how he's going to be tortured, how he's going to die, and how they're all going to leave him. And Peter says, not me. Not me. I'll go with you to the end. And Jesus just turns and looks at him and was like, you're going to deny me 3 times. You're actually going to deny me straight up. Not just leave. You're going to deny me. No, I'd never do that. I'd never do that. And so Peter's life is this roller coaster ride. He's like, has this amazing moment, and then he has this low moment. Amazing moment and a low moment. But he never, ever leaves Jesus' side. However, when the time comes, they come to arrest Jesus. And I love how all the Gospels, Mark was written first, and then Matthew and Luke, they believe, kind of off of Mark, which Mark was written from Peter's account. Like Peter is telling Mark everything that happened. Now, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, in this, when Jesus is getting arrested, it says that someone standing near Jesus, grabbed a sword and cut off the ear of a soldier. And you don't go to cut off an ear. You go to split the head, and they duck out of the way, and you catch the ear. But John, when John's writing his gospel, John goes like this. John says, and you got to imagine, you think when these Gospels come out, right, when they're first written, you've gotten 3 Gospels. Every time it's written, it's like there was just a guy that pulled out a sword and started to fight. And then John's Gospel comes along, and he was like, and then Peter, who was near Jesus, pulls a sword out and goes to stab this soldier, cuts his ear off. He goes to fight. He is still just going against this. Jesus, you're not going to suffer. This is not the way it's going to go down. I have a way. I have a plan. And it needs to go my way. That's how it's supposed to go. And it just keeps falling, and he just keeps falling. And then at the end of the night, he denies Jesus. Because no matter how good you are at positioning your body and putting yourself out there in the right places, pressure will always reveal the position of your heart. Always. Always. It shapes us. It pulls to the surface what's really there. And even though Peter was there with Jesus, when the pressure was on, he denies him. He denies him. By this campfire, he sits and he's warming himself. And 3 different times, people are coming up and asking him, didn't you walk with Jesus? I said, I don't even know him. I don't know him. I don't know him. And so Jesus is eventually tortured. He's crucified, but then he comes back. He comes back, and then he goes back to his disciples. And he's already talked to them a couple of times. And where we pick up here in John 21, where we pick up, all of this has gone on. And Peter decides, I'm going to go back to fishing. So John 21, 1 through 14 says this. And after this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. And Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. They said to him, well, we'll go with you. They went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. And just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to them, Children, do you have any fish? And they answered him, No. He said to them, Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. And that disciple whom Jesus loved, therefore said to Peter, It is the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land. They were about 100 yards off. And when they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with fish laid out on it and bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you've just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. And when I heard this growing up, every time it was Peter going back to his old life? Peter had given up. Peter didn't know what to do, so he just was going back fishing. But Peter never quit. The whole way. I mean, Jesus is calling him, "Get behind me, Satan," and he doesn't go anywhere. God cuts him off because he's talking when he shouldn't be. He doesn't go anywhere. He embarrasses himself walking on the water, doubting, falls. He doesn't go anywhere. Peter's not the guy that quits. So what's he doing? What's he doing going out there? Does it not remind you of the very first story we just said about Peter when he was mending his nets and Jesus said, "Let's go fishing"? Have you ever been lost? Or you lose a child and you say, or when you go out somewhere, like, if we get separated, you come back to this spot. This is where I'll find you. This is where I'll find you. I think Peter was confused. And Peter was absolutely lost. He didn't know what to do. So I'm going to go back to where I was found. Because that is the first thing in the call of Jesus, is that you're found. And we need to understand this before we move further. Because you need to understand this. You need to understand that the reason why you're here is because Jesus is laying claim on you. That's why you're here. It could have been because somebody invited you. It could have been because you're doing a favor for a friend. It could be because maybe you actually want to be here. But you're here because you're meant to be found. And you know, when I listen to somebody who talks about God finding them, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Somebody that really believes that they were found, man, you can see that passion in their eyes. You can see that. I was found, not I was helped. I was doing good. Jesus helps me. Jesus helps me along the way. I'm pretty amazing myself. He just makes me a little more amazing. And there are those people. There are those things, those times where you feel that way. You have those interactions where it's not Jesus found me, it's like he discovered me. But Peter says, I want to go back to where I'm found. And we see this when they catch the fish, right? If he was going to be fishing and they catch all this fish, then he's going to help pull up the fish. That's what I came out here to do, right? To go back to my old life, to fish. And that's what you just did. You just caught all these fish, but the second they say, "That's Jesus," he's like, "Bye." Like, it worked. It worked. I went back to the same clothing rack that Mom and Dad said, "This is where you go if we get separated." Like, it worked. And he jumps into the water. And you can imagine with just every time he's hitting the water and kicking into the water, everything is replaying over in his head. What's it going to be like when I get there? What's it going to be like? And he gets up on shore, and there's a fire. And the last time he sat at a fire, he denied him. And so he's probably thinking, I hope I get a redo. Maybe I'll get a redo. But here's the thing. We just need to be honest. In life, like, we don't get redos. You don't. But you can be renewed. What has happened, what you've done, that shapes you. It does. It doesn't have to stick with you, but it definitely shapes you. It definitely informs you whenever you go to move forward. It's there. And so he gets out of the water and he goes to meet Jesus. And here's what it says in 21, verse 15. It says, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. And he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend my sheep. And Jesus said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved, because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to Jesus, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you don't want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, now follow me. You're found. When Jesus finds you, there is a moment where you have to face where he has found you. And he's asking Peter this 3 times. 3 times. Peter's having to face what it is that he's done. He's having to own up to it. But Jesus is offering him again, you're found, and he offers you forgiveness. You're sitting here tonight and you're like, yeah, but my search history. Yeah, but the way I talk to this person. Yeah, but the way my anger is. Yeah, but this addiction. Yeah, but this. Yeah, but this. And Jesus is going, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. So follow me. I forgive you. You accept it. Follow. Follow me. And if you even pick this verse apart, our English language just says love, right? It's like, I love my wife, I love that movie. It's like we use the same word, but in the Greek, there are 4 different words for love. And 2 of them are in this verse. And when Jesus first sits down and is talking to Peter, he says, do you agape me? He uses the word agape, which is unconditional love. It's the highest form of love. And Peter says, Jesus, my love is more like philia, which is friendship, brotherly love. So he's like, do you unconditionally love me? Peter goes, I love you like a friend, like a brother. And he says, Peter, this is the second time, he says, do you unconditionally love me? And Peter goes, I love you like a brother, like a friend. And the third time, Jesus does something interesting. He says, Peter, do you love me like a friend or like a brother? And Peter says, you know all things. Like you know me. Yeah, that's where I'm at. And he still says, come follow me. So let's read this. He's like, Peter, are you at like 100%? And Peter goes, I'm at like 70. And he's like, Peter, are you at like 100? And he goes, I'm at 70. And he goes, Peter, are you at 70? He says, yeah, you know me. I'm done acting like I'm at 100. I'm done acting like I'm at 100. I'm not. I'm at 70. And Jesus is like, give me all that 70. You give me all that 70, and we'll go. And see, that's what's powerful in this room, is that if little numbers were popping up over your heads, there's different numbers, right? And Jesus is like, all right, give me that. Give me every bit of that number. And let's go. Let's go. He's not lowering his standard. He's coming to Peter's level so that he can raise Peter up. And that's huge. Pastor Brandon said this point last week in Sunday service. One of the greatest ways to show somebody you love them is when they have fallen. When you show somebody, when you treat somebody like they're 100, when you know they're at 70 or 50 or 20, man. So he says, follow and feed. Follow and feed. You don't got to have it all figured out. You don't got to feel like you got to go fighting for me. You don't got to feel like you got to go fix everything. Follow me and feed. Follow and feed. We make this thing so complicated and we pile so much on our shoulders. And we act like following is something unique. I even said this, I think, the other day. I was like, discipling, and that's not something very natural in our culture, but it is. How many people do we follow on Instagram? I mean, there's so many leaders that we know what they're doing. We know what's going on. We check in on them all the time. We watch their videos. We follow them. Jesus is saying, follow me, watch me, and feed sheep. But Jesus, I'm a fisherman. Why are you using a shepherd analogy? Exactly. Peter, you don't know how to do that. So you have to rely on me. How do I feed other people? I don't have that kind of resources, because you see, the really cool thing is, as he's sitting there breaking bread and he's eating the fish and the loaves, there's a story that Peter recalls in Mark when Jesus feeds the 5,000 with fishes and loaves that they didn't have. He provides these resources when they didn't have any resources. And right before that, it says that Jesus looks at the people and he has such compassion on them. His heart's broke for them because they are like sheep without a shepherd. And so how do you feed? How do we follow and feed? Okay, Jesus, you found me. I'm at like 50. I'm at like 20. You've forgiven me. I accept that. Like I'm all in. All of my 20s in. All of my 50. All of my 70. I'm in. So, okay, I follow you. How do I feed others? Well, look to the Good Shepherd. One of the most popular verses in Scripture, we have Psalm 23. Psalm 23 reads like this: The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Psalms 23, without a shepherd. I am my own shepherd, all I do is want. I am not sure which pasture to lie down in, because everywhere else looks greener. I walk along rough waters, too rough to drink, and my soul is dry. I follow my own path. It's all up to me. It's my name. It's my brand. When I'm in the valley of the shadow of death, I worry and stress. I'm afraid I'll never get out. My plans and money cannot seem to comfort me. I post my feast so that my enemies may see and remain my enemies. My wounds don't heal. My hunger never stops. My position is uncertain. My cup is bottomless. Surely chance and luck will surround me, that I may pass away and be forgotten in the biggest house my works could build. How do you feed? Go to Psalm 23. When people are near you, are you leading them to green pastures? Are you leading them beside still waters? Or when they get near you, it's rough? Are you walking with people through the valley of the shadow of death? Not like catch you when you get out. Are you comforting people? Are you protecting other people? And guess what? If you're sitting there and you're like, no, okay. Well, it just so happens that when you start following after Christ, and you're getting into His Word, and you're reading devotionals, and you're checking with people that do, because there are people around you that you're like, man, I'm not very generous. I would love to be generous. Hang out with somebody that's generous. Man, they are so forgiving. I just seem to hold on to grudges. Hang out with that person. Follow Jesus. You're right, you don't have the resources to feed. You don't. And that's why it flows. That's why you stay in the presence of God, because you can't. Because you can't. And Peter finally got to that point. I can't. Finally. After he just knew that he could. And I'm telling you, when you're following after Christ, when you realize you're found, because I know that there are so many people in here at so many different places, that when the word found, that Jesus has found you, your heart, I want to be found. Gosh, I'm so lost. Everybody may not think it, everybody may not see it, but I am so lost. And you're telling me He would find me even when I'm screwing up on the regular? Like, I just want to be found. And then there's some of you that's like, I know that. I know that I'm found, but this. And He's going, yeah, you're right. So I forgive you. Like, can we go? Can we start feeding? Can we start following? Come on, follow me. Because when you go to Acts 2 and you see that the Spirit of God has fallen and nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's like, what in the world? What is happening? What's happening? What's going on? We see this guy named Peter stand up. He actually paused. He doesn't just stand up and blurt. That's progress. And he says, it's 10 in the morning, Pete. Like, everybody's saying that they're drunk the way that they're acting. And I love that he's not completely not Peter, right? Like, he stands up and the first thing that he says is, guys, it's 9 in the morning. Like, nobody's drunk. And then he starts to tell him, he starts to point to Jesus. Because that's what it is to follow and feed. You do that when you're doing both. You're pointing to Jesus the whole time. I got to keep my eyes on Him so that I can feed. And the focus is never here. Once the focus goes here, you're sinking. Once the focus goes here, your plan is wrong. And you will crash. And you'll be this person in the psalm without a shepherd. And Jesus is saying, I don't want that for you. Follow and feed, because this is how you finish. This is how you finish. When He tells Peter, you're going to die for me, we read that like it's almost like it's a punishment. Like, yeah, you've denied me, so, well, you're going to die for me now. Like, you're going to give it all. But that would have been the best news to Peter. You mean I don't give up? I don't walk away? Like, I get to the end, right? I get to the end. That's what you're telling me. I make it. Yeah, Peter, because finally, man, you realize that I found you and I forgave you just so that I could walk with you. And so that I could give you exactly what you needed for this life and for those around you. And that's what every person in this room is called to. You're found. Be that. be found, be forgiven. Accept that. Accept that. Follow. You don't have to figure everything out. Follow. Watch that 70 go to 71, then to 72, then to 73, and then have a terrible day and go back to 65. And then 74. Follow and feed others around you. And we'll finish when we do this thing together.
Again, thanks so much for tuning in today. We hope that you've enjoyed this message and that you felt the presence of God right where you are. If you did enjoy it, we'd love to see you live at one of our campuses. Mount Hope meets at 9, 11, and 5, and Summersville meets at 11. We'll see you there.